referred to as the Empire State Library Network, and we collaborate very closely together. And South Central covers 14 counties and 10,000 square miles within kind of the South Central region of New York State. And so that's the quick, we're at scrlc.org for more information. And so with that, if you've not already found the closed captioning feature and would like to use that, click on Show Caption on your taskbar. And Zoom constantly is changing. And if you don't see it there, then go to the 3 dots at the bottom left of your screen. Throughout the presentation, you're welcome to type questions and comments via the chat feature. And if you'd like everybody to see your questions and comments, be sure to select everyone in the drop-down menu of the chat box. And as you know, today's webinar is being recorded, but we are going to pause it at certain points in the morning. And so there will be portions of it shared with all registrants, along with information about how to request a certificate of attendance. And there will also be a link to the evaluation form. And the questions on the form are from the Institute of Museum Library Services, and I will talk about that here in a second. And we had to use specific language. And why? Because this program is supported with Federal American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA funds that were allocated to the New York State Library by the Institute of Museum and Library Services. This is the final program in the series that we have been offering this past year under our ARPA project called Digital Justice for Disability Justice. And you'll find some of the past recordings on our YouTube channel. At our events, we offer a land acknowledgement. And indeed, our office occupies the traditional and unceded homelands of the Gayako'ono, the Cayuga people, one of the 6 nations of the Great Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So we invite you to consider the history of your land wherever you are. And Christine, my colleague, is going to post a link to Native Land Digital that identifies original Indigenous territories, not only in the US, but Canada and around the world. And we also acknowledge that knowing this past is just a starting point, realizing that colonialism and oppression create trauma for Indigenous people today. And we'll share some links in chat for non-Indigenous attendees to look at after our program, if you're so inclined. And if you identify as an Indigenous person, we are so glad you're here, and we welcome your ideas for how to provide better support. Also, SCRLC does have a code of conduct that Christine will post the link to in the chat shortly. But basically, please be kind, respectful, and let everyone have a turn, especially in the breakout rooms. Okay, now to our presenter. You'll find much more biographical information on the registration page, and Rebecca may have pieces to add, so I'll be brief. Rebecca Olin is an associate professor and director of digital accessibility at Purchase College Library, SUNY. Her BA is in education, and she has an MA in literature and an MLIS, both from Kent State University. Her work in library instruction that exposed her to inaccessible content, advocacy work, especially with vendors, and her connection to students with disabilities, and her background as a rare disease patient and advocate has led to a synergy regarding accessibility best practices and inclusive design. Rebecca is also an International Association of Accessibility Professionals certified professional in accessibility core competencies. Hope I got that all right. And with that, I will turn the morning over to Rebecca.
Hi, all. I'm so glad that you decided to join us today. So as Mary Carroll explained, I have a really um, varied path that got me here. Started off at Purdue in English education and double majored in professional writing. Um, and have always been drawn to disability. I had a sister who was profoundly disabled. She had a disorder called Rett syndrome, um, and she was a spastic quadriplegic who was nonverbal. So I think that's always been in my background. I think I've always been very open to the idea of disability and the fact that people are diverse. And I've seen the damage that is done when we don't acknowledge that, and the exclusion of that. So, one example would be, my religious institution had never had anyone like my sister in attendance. Um, and that was a challenge, right? Because they weren't ready for that accessibility. So I don't know in the group how many people have uh, been to any of the other SCRLC events. So if you wouldn't mind putting that in the chat, it would give me a background because I did use that as a diving board for my presentation today. So if you wouldn't mind letting us know in the chat if you have attended any of those, that would be terrific. And I'm going to begin my presentation, but I need to share my screen first, so hang on. And I just lost my Zoom window. Hold on one second, sorry about this. Yes, Mary Carol? Okay, terrific. So I talk about in this presentation why digital accessibility matters. I mean, I've already given you a little bit of background of my sensitivity to exclusion. And my goal here today, my ultimate goal, I have specific objectives for what, you should be able to do when you leave. But my real goal is that we could, in this 2 hours, actually get something done, which might be refreshing because I don't know about you, but I've been in a lot of meetings in the last couple of years where there's a lot of ingestion and not a lot of action. So my hope today is that we can get beyond ingestion and actually move towards action, even if that action is acknowledging what you don't
No.
know. April, I'm going to mute you. Okay. Even if it's acknowledging what you don't know and setting that up as a gap and a goal, that's really important. So we're also going to talk a little today about the value of ignorance and failure. And I'm hoping that we can get comfortable with those concepts as we move forward, because I really think ignorance and failure are extremely important in understanding how to move forward with all accessibility. There you go. So I'm going to put in the chat again the link to the anonymous feedback form. And I'm going to ask us to test this form right now by answering the question, what brought you here today? But throughout the session, we're going to use that anonymous feedback form as a model of what you could do in your own staff meetings and something that you could do in your own programming in your libraries or your institutions, because not everyone feels comfortable participating in the same way. And this is an important piece of understanding and approaching the idea of inclusion with real sensitivity. So I'm going to ask you to test out that form and put in what brought you here today, what drew you to this session, what do you hope to walk away with? So I'm going to share some of these because you can't see the back end, but I can. So right now, for the people who came in, Mary Carol, you might need to share that link again. I don't know if the people who just came in will be able to access it. But we're going to just take a minute and try this anonymous feedback form as a sort of standard practice in what we do. And this is something we now do in our library at every single meeting and program. And right now we're practicing it with talking about why we came here today. So now I'm going to give you the dirt. What are people saying? I want to do a better job on the subject, and I feel like there's a lot I don't know. I don't know who wrote that, but I feel you, and I've been working in this for a long time. I want to make sure we have accessibility for all in a sensitive manner. I want to learn more about accessibility challenges and solutions. I'll try to come up with some solutions, but it's a group effort. More ways to ensure our workshops and digital spaces are accessible. Create a better understanding and learn and grow professionally. This person says, I feel, oh, this is an activist in here. I feel that we're underserving people with disabilities, both in person and digitally, and I want to learn ways that we can improve on both fronts. My hope is for communities and libraries to be inclusive for everyone, where no one feels othered because of who they are, including people with disabilities. I want to do my part and also keep the issue of exclusion in my consciousness. Yeah. So I have a tendency when I am excited about something to go too fast. And I deliberately tried to keep the number of slides low in this presentation. We have 2 hours. I've got 38 slides, but I want to be deliberate. I want to be intentional, and I want to keep our consciousness together about this, because it is, that is the key, is remaining conscious. And I'll tell you some anecdotes about that in a minute. Curiosity. Okay. I'm involved in this topic from a software developer perspective. Okay. Our clients provide the content, but we need to make sure that we're developing and supporting the infrastructure for their audiences. That's awesome. A vendor in the house. I want to understand what others need, and I want anything I create to be welcoming and useful. Okay, so that's about 10 responses. And I want to, just for a second, how many people we have in here? We have 28 people in here. So let's talk about that. Mary Carol, you can go ahead and pop that link in again in case somebody did come late. But I want to be conscious about that. We have 28 participants. We have 10 responses. So that just shows you that even in this group of people that we have here today, there is a variety of comfort levels. Maybe people didn't have anything to say. Maybe they're just getting their coffee, right? In Oklahoma, you're tired. I don't know. So that just goes to show you that in every program, you're going to have a variety of approaches, and you're going to need to provide a variety of ways of engagement. And we're going to talk about that as part of universal design when we get to that part of the presentation. Okay, so what are the objectives today? This is a lot. Somebody who has a background in education, this is a lot, but I think we can do it. So we're going to describe what digital accessibility is and why it matters. We're going to define how digital accessibility pertains to library staff as information creators and curators. Right? We're going to describe what a VPAT is and isn't and why it's relevant. So my software developer, perk up, it's going to be important. Determine relevant existing efforts and how to make them more transparent to patrons. And understand that advocacy is a shared responsibility. It's one of the reasons I want to model us working together. I want you to start thinking about how you can work together with your partners, because I don't know about you, but I feel like everyone is understaffed, overworked, underpaid. I mean, at least in libraries, I can tell you that. Am I seeing some heads nodding? And libraries are under attack. I mean, I don't want to get political in this, but I heard yesterday in the news that in Missouri, the current budget does not account for public library funding at all. So now you mount an effort. Let's say we had somebody here from Missouri who had no funding. Now you're trying to include more people with less, right? It's a very difficult balance. We're going to brainstorm ways to work together in the consortium to maximize efforts. And we're going to plan for potential ongoing training for workshop attendees and for relevant staff. And I think that's something that Mary Carol was really interested in seeing what kinds of things a CRLC can do going forward to keep this momentum. But, even if not a CRLC, every, area, you can now meet up with people so much more easily, since since the pandemic, I feel like there are so many opportunities to coordinate with people. And just as I showed you the anonymous feedback form, I didn't really have it set to talk about in my presentation, but one of the things that I do and have really benefited from is an accountability hour. So I, whether it's with an intern who's working on something or with a colleague who has a goal, I just actually suggested this to someone who works in our Office of Disability Resources. We both want to learn how to get better at using a screen reader so that we can test things. And you need time for that. So actually blocking off the time and having an accountability hour can be useful when we get to that part about how we can work together. Okay, so we're going to do a little reflection here. More participation. There's going to be participation. More participation. So I'm going to go ahead and put this link in the chat. And I'm going to ask you to edit this Google Doc. So we're going to start creating things together. Awesome. I see you popping in. That's awesome. So what assistive technology do you use and embrace? And what are some gaps that you've already identified for you personally and for your library regarding assistive technology and or digital accessibility? So let's get specific about this and make a list so that we can all work together and walk away with an understanding of what our target areas really are. So one of the things I'll say is that under what assistive technology do you use and embrace, I'd also like you to think about personally what assistive technology you use and embrace, because I think that especially in the last couple of years, we've all been assisting ourselves differently. So, and maybe had some different challenges. So feel free to put personal items of assistive technology so that we can sort of think wide open about what our target audience is, because we are our target audience too, right? So I see I must have missed something in the anonymous feedback form, but somebody had put, I have a background in ADA compliance for websites, but there's just so much to learn. And I echo that sentiment every day. I feel you. Okay, so if you just arrived, I think somebody came in, and maybe I need to put this in as well. I think somebody just came in. So if you did just arrive, I just put in the link for a document that we're working on together, where we're talking about assistive technology. What assistive technologies do we personally embrace, and what assistive technologies do we perhaps use in the workplace? And then also looking at what are some gaps that we've already identified personally and for our library regarding assistive technology and digital accessibility. All right, so I trust that you can all read the document that you're creating. I'm not going to go over all the pieces of it, but I've already brought up captioning, audiobooks, scanners. We're going to talk a little bit about scanners and scanning best practices, but scanning is just an issue in general. During the pandemic, at the beginning of the pandemic, welcome to whoever just came in. Hi. I expected and I knew we would have a lot of faculty who were taking pictures of books with their iPhone and posting that as a document. And you might think, oh my gosh, that's ridiculous. But the truth is that that's not far off from what people do in general when they're not following scanning best practices. So we can talk about that. So what are some physical and digital barriers that we all encounter in libraries in general? And the book itself, I would say, is a barrier for a lot of people for a variety of reasons, whether it's, picking it up and holding it. I know sometimes if I have a big book, even just my thumb, I can never know, like I'm trying to lay down and read, so sometimes it's the book itself that becomes a barrier. Obviously, that's more the case when you have someone who is visually impaired. And so the form of the book, the monograph, right, the codex becomes an issue. So we decided in our infinite wisdom to move to like scanning and PDF. So I have my old Adobe logo there. And that in and of itself is a huge barrier for a lot of people. So portable document format, PDF format, sounds really flexible because it says portable. And to me, in my mind, I think that's great. That's a format that I definitely want to embrace if I'm looking to make things more accessible. But the problem is, unless you actually do the work to make those scans accessible, and that work comes from the minute you pull something off of a shelf, um, you actually create another barrier. So, in terms of scanning best practices, we'll talk about that more, but a lot of it depends on your equipment and a lot of it depends on you actually cleaning your equipment, making sure that whatever you're scanning is clean to begin with and doesn't have writing on it and whatnot. And I'll show you some examples of really bad scans. I'm not sure how much you're using this. I know I have a mix here in the audience of public libraries, some, I know I have a software developer, and I know that there are some academic libraries. So in terms of the registrants, there was a wide variety of people who signed up for this. But we'll talk more about the sort of traditional library space in general. What you see in the middle of the screen is a row of shelving that holds DVDs. So there are a lot of problems there. The DVDs themselves can have accessibility issues in that they might not be properly captioned or have audio description for people who are low or no vision. But I'd be interested if you popped in the chat what other problems you might see with this setup. Yeah, too high for a wheelchair. The shelves are high. Yeah, and if my back is acting up, those shelves are too low. So both, right? Absolutely. Yeah, being able to open the holder of the DVD to look at what's inside. So in the previous SCRLC workshops, they talked about physical universal design in libraries as an outgrowth of architecture. And you see a perfect example of this in the upper right hand frame here, where I have a photo of a spiral staircase. So that is really a huge accessibility issue. We have that spiral staircase going to a place that you cannot get to from an elevator or another way. And this is the case for a lot of us. So I'm not going to deal a whole lot with physical accessibility today because I know SCRLC had Krista come in and really do an amazing job with that. But certainly we'll talk about a little bit about how to try to think more flexibly about how we're using our spaces. Yeah, will I be able to pull the DVD off the crowded shelf? Absolutely. And then in the bottom right, you'll see the photograph is of a sort of an aerial view of our stacks in a lounge area. And this is another example of something that's inaccessible. So where the books are, you can get to from an elevator or stairs, but that top level that's sort of even with the lampshades is completely inaccessible for anybody who can't take the stairs. So that becomes an issue. So we have all sorts of physical and digital barriers that we deal with. So what is digital accessibility, right? I mean, some of you have some familiarity with it. Some of you may not, but it's really the ongoing effort to create, I mean, I think of it as a process, right? It's this ongoing process to create accessible content and to think about that accessible content, whether the user is engaging by sight, touch, or hearing. So how can I move a mouse, or can I use a keyboard for something like that? And it's an inclusive practice that allows all users to engage with content with the same ease and in the same time as each other. That in the same time as each other has become our Achilles heel, I think, in libraries, because we've gotten very used to, okay, you register, we'll provide you the caption video after the fact. Right now, thankfully, Zoom is doing some automated captioning, but we'll talk about the evils of AI in a minute. So there are some basic guidelines, and I'm going to share with you this, which is fully available to anyone. And I guess I should change my share, although you'll see how many things I have open. So I'm assuming that you can now see this, Mary Carol. So this is a card, that's okay. This is a card that SUNY has put out about EIT accessibility, electronic information technology accessibility. So these are the basic principles that we talk about within SUNY. You need to have appropriate navigation that is consistent, and you need to use meaningful titles and names of files. Things need to be readable, both in text size and font. Content has to be written concisely with minimal jargon. You want to avoid, yes, thank you for using the anon. Oh, that was in the chat, sorry. There we go. Thank you for asking. I appreciate that because I forget sometimes myself. So you want to make sure that you've got flexibility. You require only accessible software and applications and provide information in multiple formats. You want to make sure that you've got heading and lists done properly, and we'll talk about that. But you know, a good example is using numbers for a list that isn't sequential is a big no-no. So unless things go 1, 2, 3, like actually in step, you just use bullets. And you want to make sure that you do that appropriately because it will really confuse users who are dependent on screen technology. So color, sufficient color contrast is important, and you want to always pair color with another indicator, and I'll show you some examples of that if you're trying to use color and meaning. And this is one of the things that I see all the time with faculty at the college. They'll say, this is, you know, important, test on Friday or something, and they use only the color red to indicate that, and that becomes problematic. Images, we'll talk more about this, but alternate text for images, graphs, etc. Hyperlinks. You want to make sure that you're not saying http://www.purchase. That's just annoying. So nobody wants to listen to that. You want to make sure that you create your tables carefully, that video and audio have accurate captions, not just captions, but accurate captions. And you want to provide transcripts for audio recordings when possible, and try not to rely on the auto captioning. We'll talk more about that. Math and science is a huge Achilles heel for me, so I'm not going to go too far into that. I'm still learning a lot about that, where this is a process for all of us. But we do have a program at Purchase College called Equatio, EQUATIO. And it's from a company called Text Help, and it does allow for us to create more accessible math equations. My problem in general is not that technology. My problem is math. So I'll be honest, not my strong suit. So it's very hard for me to engage with software about math when I'm not good at math to begin with. But Equatio can do some really cool things. And one of the things it can do is you can actually take a picture of with your phone of an equation on a blackboard or whiteboard, and it will try to turn it into text for you, which is amazing. And it mostly works if your handwriting is okay. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the presentation. Okay, so you should see what does digital accessibility include, Mary Carol? Yep, okay. So what does it include? Let's talk about it. Optical character recognition, or OCR. This is a big jargony word that people use in digital accessibility, but basically what it means is, can I in any file highlight, copy, and drop the text into something else and have it make sense? So this is how you can often test your PDFs if you have them, is make sure that you can copy and paste into something else and that it makes sense. If you click on it and the whole thing turns blue and you can't actually highlight words, it's not accessible. So that's really a simple concept. I don't know how many of you are actually doing scanning. I think there was somebody here from a repository that might be doing more of that. I don't know how much of that you're doing in the public libraries, unless you're doing interlibrary loan. But maybe you could put in the chat how much that actually applies to your world. Alternative text descriptions of images, or what we call alt text. So alt text is not a caption for a picture. Alt text is a description of what I'm seeing. So I'll give you some examples in a little bit, but basically just to describe it, it's kind of like if I have a picture of Bart Simpson writing on a blackboard, I will not scream in class 100 times. Um, what's important? What am I seeing in that picture? And that requires some decision making on your part as you're creating documents, but it becomes a habit. So in our case at Purchase College, we might look at that from a variety of contexts. Am I looking at the Bart Simpson cartoon in the visual arts school because I'm looking at the use of color, and it's not a whiteboard or a blackboard, but it's actually a green board, and that actually sets off Bart Simpson's yellow hair, and that's important in the balance of the image. That's very different than if I'm an educator and I'm looking at the punitive effects of Bart Simpson writing on the board, "I will not scream in class" 100 times. I'm looking at those from different angles. And I may have different uses for the image. So if I have a Monet, for example, of water lilies, and I'm a professor in a class and I'm testing someone on whether or not they can identify that it's a Monet water lilies, that would require very different alt text, because if I'm developing that class to be truly universal, I'm not going to say Monet water lilies. I'm going to say I'll probably talk about the materials used. I might say a painting, but there may be times when the alt text actually has to hold back information. It's very rare, and it's only when you're testing someone. So for the most part, you want to make sure that what the person is seeing, or what you would be seeing, is described. So in that case, I would say, Bart Simpson, at the chalkboard, or at the board, writing down whatever he's writing down. And that's usually the main part of it. The caption for that may be very different. It may be who the artist was. It may be what the date is. And so a caption and alt text are not necessarily the same thing. Captioning videos, that kind of captioning is different, right? We're talking about the words that are being used, and captioning videos is a really important part of digital accessibility. We want to make sure that all of our videos are captioned. If you're providing a workshop like this, I know SCRLC is going to provide the captioned version in the end when they post it on their website. And you have a responsibility as a librarian using funds to make sure that anything that you buy is properly captioned. So a lot of the work we do at the college, or a lot of the work I do in streaming, is working with vendors to ensure that. And sometimes I'm working with independent filmmakers who really don't know about that. And so I need to educate them. And that becomes part of the requirements that we have in our contracts with them. So for example, with Swank Digital Campus, they are not allowed to accidentally provide me anything that is not properly captioned. Ensuring every document has a consistent and predictable structure. This becomes very difficult when you are working as part of a team with a variety of people. Everybody works differently. So you want to make sure that if you're putting out something as a team, that it has a predictable structure and that it is consistent, so that every time I get a workshop from your, workshop announcement from your organization, it is consistently the same. And I know where to find the information. Somebody mentioned earlier that it was difficult in the registration to find the Zoom link. And that's a good example of that, right? That, if you're used to it, then you know where to go. It's kind of like you go onto your Facebook feed and you know to click notifications or whatever. So it's about that navigation. And for your patrons who are on the spectrum, that becomes an issue as well, in terms of it becomes very frustrating for them when it doesn't have a predictable structure. Okay, so we're talking about contrast and color, And we already talked about you never want to use a color to create meaning alone. And in this example, I have never to create meaning alone in red, and then I also have it italicized so that the color is not alone in creating that meaning. Proper use of headings. So I'll show you the toolbar, but I will absolutely confess that for the first 20 years of my career, I did not know how to use headings in Word. I just didn't. I thought it was Bill Gates trying to control how I made my document look, and I just did not like that toolbar and didn't really understand it. So now I really understand that it's just so important for the structure of a document. Reading order has to be logical and intuitive. One of the easiest ways to make sure that that happens is to lean on templates and to not mess with the template. So I always had a long-standing, lifelong habit of making PowerPoint presentations and not really liking, I don't like the title there. I'm going to take that box off, and I'm like, oh no, you know what? I do need a title, so I'm going to put that back on. And when you do that, when you don't lean on the layout of the template, you mess with the order of the reading for someone who has a disability. So one of the easiest, smallest things that you can do is to stop messing with templates and have a specific, consistent style and reading order. Careful uses of bullets and numbering. We already talked about that a little bit. We talked about links needing to be contextual and unique. Well, we talked about them needing to be contextual, meaning don't spell out the link, HTTP. You want to make sure that it's clear what the person is going to. And one of the biggest offenses that I think we do as librarians and in systems is, out of expediency, we will often say, click here or for more information. And we've all been guilty of doing that. So properly synced captions, there's a lot of automated captioning tools out there. A lot of podcasters are using different tools like Azure, Vimeo, YouTube. There's a new one called Homzy. Stay away from it. It's cute text that nobody needs. It's not helpful. Cute is not always good. We'll talk about that more. But you need to make sure you are responsible. If you are putting this out, it is your responsibility to make sure that it's captioned. And we're going to talk about our own personal habits a little later on as well, because I think the only way you can really change your habits at work is to try to integrate this into your own personal life. So your own personal use of technology. It wasn't until I had a really close friend who was blind that I understood I needed to stop sharing memes on Facebook without alternate description. That was annoying to him, and it was unnecessary. So that is something that that's within my power. That takes a minute of thought. And it's amazing how it took a while for me to catch myself doing it. And it's a practice. It's like almost like a yoga practice, I would say. It's about that consciousness. Okay, so we're looking at PDFs. I told you we would talk about scanning. And I think that you probably use PDFs in your work very differently. I see somebody's working with yearbooks and optical character recognition. Yeah, that they put in the chat that the machine capture may not be enough. Okay, so we've got three different types of PDF offenses here. These are all scanned documents that have been used, at the college, good examples of things that I come across in my work. And these are impossibly inaccessible to the extent that I wouldn't even waste my time trying to remediate them. So the first one on the left, you'll see it's kind of light text that's very grainy, and it has a lot of handwriting. Things are crossed out. There's marginalia. Oftentimes we'll see coffee stains in public libraries. I'm sure you see a lot of waterlogged books that you get back. So this happens, but it's something that we cannot allow, certainly in our classes, at the SUNY level, at purchase. The middle one is a scanning issue. This is a person who did not know how to scan properly. So they did not, because we love books, right? We love books. We're librarians. So this is a brand new ALA book by a friend of mine. Well, this is a brand new copy of this ALA book by a friend of mine, who I'll mention later, Carly Spina. She works at FIT. She's amazing and an incredible advocate and very knowledgeable about accessibility. And if I wanted to scan this person who went ahead and scanned that middle scan, they were afraid to crack the spine. And I'm doing it right now in front of you. And it almost hurts as a librarian to do it, but if you want to get a good scan, that is the only way it's going to happen. Now, there is a very, very expensive piece of equipment called a Zeichel scanner that they use in repositories and in art situations, and it allows you to put the book on like this, and it's almost like a triangular shape so that you don't have to worry about that middling. Somebody has a Zeichel. There we go. I don't even know how to spell Zeichel, so good for you, Christine Brown. That's what you use for your books, right? So that you don't have to break the spine. But yeah, it can't figure out the gutter for some of the modern yearbooks. But for the most part, I mean, Christine, do you have any idea how much that Zeichel cost you? $10,000. So half the people, yeah, I see Mary Page. That's thank you for letting me call you out, Mary Page, because your look was perfect. She was like, yeah, it's a really expensive piece of equipment, plus shipping, and I'm sure you have a maintenance agreement on it as well. And Stephanie says that's cheap for one of those. Um, and we have a ScanX scanner which hooks up to a computer. I think we have 3 of those in the library. One has a document feeder. I love the ScanX scanner because it allows me to see what I'm scanning while I'm scanning it. Some of your copiers and scanners may already do that, but I think that having that ability to see what you're scanning is amazing, because you don't end up doing all of the work and then getting back to your desk and realizing that the scan isn't accessible, or you had a bent page, or something was wavy. But this middle scan is the kind of scan that I really can't do anything with, and wouldn't try. There's another problem in that scan that is really, really hard to see. So I'll describe it to you, but sometimes the pages are very thin on items, and there's a really simple trick for that. I'm going to share with you my scanning tips webpage. So I'll place this in the chat for you. And I know I'm already getting behind on time, so I'll try to move faster. But if you're interested, there are some tips on there. But having even one of those things that you have in tote bags, the black plastic from the bottom of the tote bag, or black piece of construction paper, which I never understood why they really include in the construction paper, because who's using it unless it's Halloween? I'm not really sure what you're doing. But so if you love black construction paper, please correct me in the chat. But there are some, if you do that on the back, it blocks out the bleed through on those thin pages. And then the last scan that we have here is a one in which the right gutter is completely cut off. And that requires, that not only is going to mess up the OCR, but it requires even your sighted users to sort of do the gestalt of figuring out what that word is. And that can be frustrating for people. Okay, so where is digital accessibility? We talked about what it is. Now, where is it? So it's any one of these places. It's in documents, both internal and external. Your hardware. That's one area that you need to look at in terms of digital accessibility. Does it, does the screen on your scanner have the ability to help you in the way that I just explained mine does, for example? Software, that's the software that actually runs that. Maps, how accessible are your maps? So do you not just from a standpoint of color, contrast, all of that, but do you include sensory information on your maps for your patrons and visitors? If you have people who have Tourette's, do they have a place that they can go and be comfortable and not feel like they're going to be bothering anyone because they may be more self-conscious about it? Could you offer that kind of space to them? How difficult would that be for you? And can you let them know that ahead of time? So guides, any guides that you have, live guides that you have, any social media posts that you have. We're going to talk a lot about social media later because I think most of us are using social media in some way. If you're not, you can go ahead and so in the anonymous feedback form, I won't call you out. But the truth is, I think a lot of us are using social media on a regular basis, and that's a great place for us to practice these skills. And apps, digital accessibility exists in apps. And so we need to think about that if we're suggesting apps to people and they're using them in our workshops or in working with us or in communicating with us. So users should be able to engage regardless of sight, motor skills, hearing, attentional issues, seizures, etc. Okay, so who's responsible for digital accessibility? Any content creators and actually content users. So employers are responsible, as I just mentioned. Librarians, we have you in the house. Your board, your library board is responsible for digital accessibility. Your board needs to know about digital accessibility. IT, your vendors, any designers, website designers, any teachers, and any students and users, and anybody who's adopting, acquiring, or curating. So you may not consider yourself a librarian, but if you fall under that category, then you too are responsible for digital accessibility. So who needs or benefits from digital accessibility? Obviously patrons with disabilities, right? That's a no-brainer, but busy moms. Like I mentioned earlier, I need the captions on certain things. Sometimes I need to have something read to me. Commuters. You see people on the subway in New York all the time with the AirPods in. You don't know that they're listening to music. I don't see them dancing around. They're probably listening to podcasts. They may be listening to books. It's important for them. And also for people who are, commuting by car, they may put it on their speakers and catch up on work. People who share housing or who are in loud environments. This was what we saw during the pandemic. This is what we saw spike. And this is the group that benefited so much from the digital accessibility we did have because everybody was on top of each other. People in bright sunlight. Right? You never know. So let's talk about who else. Color blindness is something that we don't often think about. I like when I frame the idea of disability to try not to think of it as a lack of something or a limitation of something, but sometimes it's not a deficiency. Sometimes it's a superpower. So I don't know in the audience who wants to participate in this activity, but you can do it in the anonymous forum if you want to as well, if you don't want to identify yourself. But for me, in this slide, there are 3 spheres. The first sphere to me is salmon orange, and it has a number in the middle of it in green. I don't know how many of you can see the numbers. Let's see if I can see you all. So you might want to let me know if you can see the numbers in there. You can do it in the chat, certainly. And in the middle sphere, it's all greenish colors to me. And in the middle, there is a number that seems to be in like pink and mauve. And then in the last sphere, I see colors of orange, salmon, brown, green, moss, but I don't see a number. So if you see a number in that last one, if you wouldn't mind letting us know what that is that you see. Okay, so I'm going to refer you back as we talk about some of these things to the SCRLC YouTube session from May 2022. So for those of you who are not in the consortium, you can see their YouTube link off of their main page, and maybe you guys could put that in the chat for me. But Krista Macy did a wonderful job with that from physical accessibility or universal design standpoint, and talked about universal design as a process that enables and empowers a diverse population by improving human experience, health and wellness, and social participation. So that's universal design for libraries, but there's also universal design for learning in libraries. And in this way, this is what I think I can engage everybody the most on here, is thinking about how can you have multiple means of engagement. So I'm trying to model that here in this workshop, even though we're not together in person. I'm giving you the anonymous feedback form. We're using the chat. I have the reflections. You have a lot of different ways of participating. So another way of doing that would be teamwork, or working together in groups. And I know we haven't gotten to a breakout group yet, but also multiple means of representation, sort of physical and digital, offering that. Maybe you have also like a QR code as well. Those aren't always accessible to people, but that can be used very, very helpful. And then multiple means of action and expression. If you're asking somebody to do something, if they need to show their learning, does it have to be an in-person presentation, or could it be a video, or could it be a podcast, and they could still show the same understanding? So let's get to the next reflection, which is, as a group, if you could share what you know that could help others create a toolkit. And I'm going to put this link, or my helpers could put the link in the chat. We're going to create another thing together. And hang on one second. Here's the link. And we're at 11 o'clock. I know we have, if you need to break during this, we're going to take a little bit more time to let people fill this in, because it is 4 sections. So if you could start filling this in, I'm going to break myself and then I'll come back. But if you could start sharing, what are some of the settings and features that you use or might suggest that others use or should know to use? What tools, hardware and software, have you found useful? What tutorials in terms of learning about this subject or in helping patrons have you found to be useful? And what resources, human or otherwise? I see somebody already put in the Finger Lakes Independence Center, which is awesome. So I'll be right back and let's create this together. Caitlin, thank you so much for sharing your guide. It is wonderful. And actually, I should tell everyone here on this call that I am creating a Zotero folder as we go, so that you will have a sort of bibliography of materials to work from when you leave. I think this person means DQ University. So if you're in SUNY, you have access to a thing called DQ University. What I will say is that, oh, thank you, Catherine. I'm going to make sure we have that in there as well.
My name's Catherine Pizzuto.
Oops.
I'm a library and information.
Hold on, stop.
At the University of...
Hold on. Sorry about that. I don't know if I just shared my sound with you or not. If you have a disability, you can get access to DQ University for free. So that is something that is useful. You don't have to be part of a library system to do that. Oh, this is great. Yep. All right, I got the narrator one. Okay, so I'm going to let you keep working on that. Hopefully you've had a chance to quick run and get yourself some water. And this is great. We've created a toolkit. So what I've done is I have an entire folder in Zotero, and I will punch out a list at the end of this so that you have a comprehensive list of everything. But you can also have access to these. You can bookmark these for yourself if you want to keep these Google Docs, and I will certainly keep them open for a while. So on the screen, I am sharing a little bit about the foundations of WCAG, which is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Those of you who are designers and work in web know these probably pretty intimately, but the basic principles is that you want things to be perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And that basically means a lot of what we've already talked about. There's nothing on this particular slide that I think is terribly new for us. Let's see. We've talked about audio files. We've talked about alternative text descriptions. We've talked about keyboard navigation. Your content won't cause seizures or other issues. So a lot of flashing. Remember in the very, very beginning, I mean, I'm going to date myself now, but in the very beginning of the interwebs, when people, like every single website said under construction, and there was little, you know, the flashing things that people thought were really cool. Those kinds of things can be problematic for people who have seizure disorders. So that's why, as you look at my presentation, it looks a little bit boring, not entirely. It could certainly be a little jazzier, but I try to keep it very simple. Make sure that all your buttons are large enough to activate, that there's flexibility to undo an action or accidental activation. That is something that we really need to build in. So if you've got to sign up for something in your library, or it's part of your hold system or something like that, you want to make sure that people can undo it. I know I ordered a book yesterday and I couldn't figure out how to undo the order, so the person who deals in that area is going to have to do it for me, but I would have liked to have done it myself so that she wouldn't have to. Okay, understandable. So identifiable language for text to speech. We talked about that. Audio files, definitions of key jargon or abbreviations like I've done above in both the POUR and in WCAG. People talk about WCAG all the time. When you think about the standards for web accessibility, W3C came up with those in like 2008, which is not really that long ago, right? When you consider how long we've all been on the interwebs. So it's amazing that these standards are really, and we're still developing them. It's an international cooperative effort and to create these guidelines. And I think they're coming out with WCAG 3. They're working on that now. So robust, you want to make sure that you can support all operating systems. You want to remember that your elderly patrons, if they are on a computer at all, may not have the most updated operating system. Oftentimes they're really reticent to update an operating system because things will change and it's difficult. And that's really important too for supporting the digital divide, because the newest and the best is usually the most expensive. Okay, so here's my nemesis. I talked earlier about how I didn't like this formatting ribbon because I thought Bill Gates was trying to make me, you know, have something look a certain way, and I was sort of offended by that. You can customize these. This is actually brilliant. So this is Microsoft's heading bar, and it shows what normal text looks like, what heading 1, heading 2, heading 3, and I can click on those. But it's so important to understand that so much of what we do with digital accessibility is really a piece of universal design. It's essential for some, but it's beneficial for all. And this is a great example that I use with faculty, because if you do all of your documents this way, and I'm in the habit now of doing all my emails even to people, I break it out into sections and I have headings. That's part of building a habit, but it's also part of just trying to stay accessible. This is also good for anybody else. So if you do that consistently throughout your document, it makes it much easier, as you'll see in the second image, to just input a table of contents. And the table of contents gets completely drawn from the headings within that document automatically. And if you add another heading, you just update the table of contents and you can, it's not a problem. It's easy. We used to have students in the reference area because we have a senior project, and they would be in the reference area in May crying because they were actually trying to like space over and get everything right. But this is something that Microsoft makes easy for us. They do a great job with this. So what are some built-in accessibility features that we use and can benefit from? Dictation. So that is something that I don't know about you, but I have gotten into using all the time. My notes field, dictating a text, it doesn't always get it right. And the AI captioning. So we use those. But remember, when you're talking about videos and captioning, we talked about how the auto captioning is not great. Remember that. Remember that when you're doing dictation on your phone. Make it a part of your personal consciousness, because as bad as Siri gets it, I should be careful because she's listening. As bad as she as she gets it, sometimes that's as bad as the captioning can often be. So speech recognition, touchscreen magnification, filters and custom views, and a focus option that can shut down your notifications. I use that often. I actually don't have it on now, and I meant to turn it on before this session. And then I have an Apple Watch, and the haptics are also a sort of built-in accessibility feature that, is perhaps made for someone with a disability, but benefits everyone. So if you don't know what some of these built-in things are, one of the things that I love is, and also in Microsoft, is the accessibility checker. But it doesn't have to just be in Microsoft. It's in most any program, most any robust program, and you can Google it. Google the particular name of the program and the words accessibility or disability, barriers, or VPAT, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And what you'll find is a lot of information that you didn't know at your fingertips. So the accessibility and checker in Word is essential, and it's something that we're actually trying. I'm really advocating that faculty at the college require their students to use, because if their students are creating content for workshopping in class, then they're learning how to do things accessibly, and then the professor doesn't need to worry, and the other students don't need to worry if and when somebody registers late for the class who has a disability. So it becomes part of our habit, and we become more universal as we attend to that. So I just talked about major software has the accessibility built-in tools. The apps have come a long way and are improving. Browser extensions, I know somebody mentioned the WebAIM's Wave screen reader, but the Wave tool can also be really helpful in testing a particular website. That's a built-in part of my Chrome. I have that as an extension in my Chrome. Built-in OS tools like VoiceOver. And again, I'm going to come back to being conscious and practicing what we're preaching, like actually testing things, practicing them. It's not going to be comfortable. And I'm really hoping, even though we haven't yet connected with each other, and I don't know that I'm going to do a breakout room, Mary Carol, because I'm already running behind. But don't rely on yourself alone. You need to network. So notice some of the names that are on the participants list. Reach out to them. Mary Carol, hopefully we can share them. In fact, you know what? That would be great if you could go back into this reflection too. I'm going to actually, you know what? I'll wait in a minute. Think about it. And what I'll do is in one of the reflections, we'll keep a list of people. So if you're open to being contacted and working with other people and networking, we'll have you say what your name is, what your email address is, and what type of institution you work in. Okay. Okay, so we're going to talk more about being conscious about our own digital habits, looking at our personal approach to digital media, and we're going to go into reflection number 3 now. And here is the link for that. So, what social media platforms do you currently use? What's your main goal for using social media platforms? Like, what are the upsides for you? What do you perceive to be the downsides? And after learning about those downsides, maybe, which digital habits have you examined or changed about yourself? So maybe this is something that you gained a digital habit during the pandemic. Maybe this is something that you're trying to get rid of a particular habit, but you're tweaking those digital habits. What does that look like for you right now? This is terrific. I really appreciate all of you participating in this way. It's not easy sometimes when you go to a webinar and you think, okay, I'm just going to be able to sort of sit back and listen, but to actually really lean in and be conscious of what you're doing. I'm seeing a lot of great stuff, but I'm not seeing yet that anybody's gotten to digital habits examined or changed. A couple of people. Somebody, I'm trying desperately to stop doom scrolling. That's awesome. Yeah, somebody wrote that they dropped Twitter. I'm really struggling with that because I have to say, my world literally cracked open during the pandemic, and I connected with so many amazing rare disease and disability advocates, and I put that in under the upsides, that I was able to connect, network. I've gotten opportunities to do things through them. It's been really a wonderful networking opportunity for me, both in really Twitter, Facebook as well. I think there are sometimes, rare disease Facebook groups that are really useful. Actually, one of the things that I should put in here, and I'll put in the chat, is that there's a Facebook group for WCAG professionals, and my software developer, I hope that you're on this. And then there's also the Facebook group for PDF, accessibility, and that's with Dax Castro runs that. And if you don't know who Dax Castro is, he's amazing. He is so knowledgeable. I know that you may not all be doing as much PDF work as I do, but that those two groups are amazing on Facebook and well worth being on the platform for, I think, because you can get a lot of questions answered and you can sort of debate things, right? Like a lot of software developers are on there and designers, front end people. Okay, so let's talk about social media, because social media seems relatively new to us. What's interesting is that Facebook actually allowed for alt text on images back in like 2016, so they were sort of ahead of the game. But when we think about accessibility in social media, one of the reasons I like talking about this is because I feel like we're developing personally these new habits, but so is the social media world. These are new to the social media world as well. So for a long time, people were locked out of social media. As I said, my blind friend who I shared memes with. But Instagram really only added the feature to edit Instagram AI alternative text in 2019. 2019. Like, that's amazing to me. 2019. And Twitter only added the feature to remind you to include alternate text description. So before September 2022, you had to go out of your way to follow a bot that would remind you as soon as you posted something on Twitter, it would say, hey, you didn't include alternate text. And then you'd have to go in, delete that because there was no way to just edit it. So now you can edit, you can go in, and I'm going to include in the, actually I'll make sure that that's in my Zotero list, as well as the Instagram one. I think actually all of these are in there, so I may have just duplicated that. I'll get the duplicates out. So Twitter added it in September 2022. Somewhat embarrassing story. There was a high admin person at Purchase College who tweeted something that did not have alternative text. I'm on the accessibility committee, so it was my job. It was my turn. I drew the straw to reach out to this high administration person and explain to them that they really can't do this anymore, and how to do it properly. And within 24 hours of sending that email, Twitter unveiled their image description reminder. So I had just told this person to follow the bot, and then I had to be like, no, never mind. But that's the way this goes, right? And then famously in just November of this past year, Elon Musk laid off the entire accessibility team for Twitter. So I could cry. It's really sad. I'm not sure that Twitter is going to survive all of this. But the bottom line is that you need to check these things and you need to practice. So it's really important. I talked about not getting cute. And here is, I'm going to share, hold on. I'm going to share a video that explains why you don't want to get cute with something like Hamzi, for example. I have to share the screen and I keep disappearing my windows. Okay, so this is what it sounds like when you've got cute in a video or for decorative text. Decorative text for a screen reader.
Mathematical bold capital 1, Cyrillic small letter EM. Mathematical bold script capital T, Cyrillic small letter EN. You get the idea, LOL.
Screen readers say the darndest things.
You want to post, "I'm obsessed with this show," using a decorative font, but your friend's screen reader is picking up some technical gibberish. Just use the default font.
I'm obsessed with this show, Squid.
Less code, more real talk, better TV show recommendations.
Okay. Sorry about that. I did not activate the captions right away, so I'm hoping that I'll just share the link and you can look at that on your own. It is auto-generated captioning, but it's relatively good. So I'm going to put that in here. But it's a good example. So this is the kind of thing that we do on social media all the time. I will have this link, Accessible Social, in my list of things that I'd like you to look at. It's Alexa Heinrich. She's excellent and created this as a developer. Okay, so I'd like to actually get verbal for a minute. So we've done the reflections, working on sort of in our little silos, but if we could just take a moment and if anybody would be willing to raise their hand and maybe tell me how they might describe this. So the question is, how would you describe this image? It's not like the Bart Simpson one we talked about, right? There's definitely information here that needs to be described. So this is a good example of a meme that one could share. So I see Holly, sure. Go ahead and unmute, Holly.
Can you hear me? I can.
I can, yeah.
Okay. So you might say meme of starry, I don't think that's the right starry night, but whatever image painted on a van with caption that says, "Look at that van go," in 2 words.
Yeah, so what I love about what you did was that you were clear to include the text on the image itself. So yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing I would say. I would say, you know, an image of a van painted with starry night and words, "Look at that van go." Right? So there's an inherent joke. So that's terrific. Thank you. So what did NASA do? I don't know how many of you were tuned into the news when NASA made a real splash with its alternative text in the last year. They got their Webb telescope images, and the images were so amazingly described that there were actually news articles written about it. So how would you describe this? You would need some expertise. I'm not shocked that there's silence. Oh, I see somebody. Space. Yeah. Space, exactly. So the actual description, hold on. The actual description is super intricate and super descriptive. Now, normally you don't want a whole lot written, but this basically says, "The image is divided horizontally by an undulating line between a cloud space forming a nebula along the bottom portion and a comparatively clear upper portion." So they have a whole team that works on this, and they just did an amazing job on it. So there is an article about this if you have access in your library system to the Washington Post. And Christine says, "We do this for our historical collections on the New York Heritage, where we try to literally describe the photographs, and it's difficult if I don't know the difference in the 19th century agricultural equipment or whatever is pictured." That is a problem. And I have to say, for me at the college, that's a real problem because I can't really help. Somebody wrote, "I don't even know what that means," after reading it. I can't even, I can't help a faculty member say in anthropology, I would say it wrong. And I know I'm limited in my vocabulary on that. So I would say, you know, a man in tribal dress. That's completely inaccurate, right? So somebody who knows that area is going to do a much better job. So there are limitations on what we can do, and there are limitations on AI. So when we talk about the limitations on AI and we talk about captioning fails, this is a perfect example. You can see my screen, correct? So this is Tanahashi Coates, the author. His name is spelled like this. I just put it in the chat. His name is spelled Tanahashi Coates. And the AI captioning read it as Donna Hussey Coates. So I don't think that Tanahashi Coates would be very happy with that. And that's not very accurate. Perhaps as these technologies get better, they will do a better job. But I do not think that there's going to be a time in our lifetime that we don't need to double check these things. So if you're using something, you need to double check and make sure that it makes sense, because you don't want your patrons who are hard of hearing or deaf being left out of the conversation. Okay, so here's another perfect example of caption fails. My friend Meryl Evans, who's an amazing deaf advocate and accessibility specialist, works for Equal Entry, which is a company that does help with accessibility issues, and she does digital marketing as well. So what they did was they did a study, and they had scripts, and because Meryl is deaf, the sound of her voice when she comes out is different, and the AI doesn't recognize it in the same way. And here's an example of how every single tool is going to take that differently. Hamzi, she just told me, is the worst. That's why I mention it. It's not in this chart, but the script said psychedelic, YouTube said psychedelic, Vimeo said backadelic, and Azure said that Cadillac. Okay. Snobbish, a little further down, wasn't picked up at all by YouTube, was picked up by Vimeo as cannabis and by Azure as nabis, because she has a different type of speech. So it's dependent on the AI recognition of the speaker. You have to consider that if you are sharing a video that's a non-native speaker, a muffled speaker, someone with speech impediments, or if your technology lacks clarity, all of those things are going to be risk factors. So let's get to the meat of, okay, we're already at like 11:38. Let's get to the meat of what does this mean for the things that we buy and do? So my software designer, I hope, is still with us, but one of the things that we look at the SUNY system is everything that we adopt in our library, all of our databases. We ask the vendors for technically it's their conformance report, but everybody refers to it as the voluntary product accessibility template, or VPAT. So when we talk about a VPAT, it's really just the template itself, but when you fill in the template, it's called a conformance report, but that doesn't really matter. The idea is that usually vendors will have someone in-house or will contract with a third party to fill this out. And one of the things you want to ask is, how current is it? Is there any other indication that they take this seriously? You know, do they have a point person? Is there a roadmap if there's an issue? What do I do? Is there a place I can complain about a barrier? For the VPAT itself, when you look at it, you know, are the remarks actually descriptive, or is it really minimal? And you need to think about how risky the program or the tool or whatever it is that you're adopting is. So is this something that every single person needs to interact with in order to check out a book, for example? Is this something that every single person needs to interact with in order to register for your program? Or is this something that one person in a back end office is using, and so it's not quite as risky? So what we did at SUNY is we created the SUNY Library Accessibility cohort, and we created a procurement toolkit. And this is one of the first things that we did in the in the pandemic, we gathered as a group and we learned about digital accessibility together. But one of the things that this link that I just put in the chat, I think will really help you with is that this is something that, we did with state funds, and we wanted it to be used as a tool. There are other big, good tools out there, like the Library Accessibility Alliance, I think it's now called. It used to be the Big Ten Alliance. And what some places do is we do have a third-party vendor repository where we have information. You can contact SLC. You can get a lot of these conformance reports already. So it's not like you have to do it all from scratch. You can look at what other people have said and done. And I have permission to share a couple of these things from SUNY. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And Mary Carol, if you would just not... can we pause the recording? Is that possible? And this is a key. So advocacy is really a key piece to how you make a difference ultimately, both in your institution, in the landscape, and in the world. And it's one of the things that feeds my soul most about what it is that I do is the vendor advocacy piece. I came into librarianship really working from the educational perspective and being an instruction coordinator and loving being in the classroom, and I do miss that. But the ripple effect of the work that I can do with vendors is awe-inspiring to me, and I really feel like that can make a difference. I see somebody put something in the chat. Oh, that must have been for the document, Christine. I'm sorry. I'll share. I'll ask them if I can share that document with the group. Okay. So again, know your vendor. Think of them as your neighbor. Contact them when you don't have an emergency. Check in with them at the holidays. The pandemic was a wonderful consciousness raising opportunity for me to really focus on the people that I was working with as people first. And I think we forget that sometimes in our haste because we are understaffed, overwhelmed, underpaid, right? And we all have 12 jobs. So it's really important to have that relationship so you can explain your goals. One of the things that I'd like to be an outcome of this particular session is that, and maybe you can share now in the chat if you are willing to meet with other people or continue a relationship or talk about this more, and I'm sure SCRLC would give you the platform to do that, is put your name and your institution and maybe your email if you want to continue, if you want help continuing that conversation for yourself, because a lot of people work in very small libraries where it's just a one-person deal, and that's really a difficult situation. So address non-compliance issues and keep documentation, anything, a folder, on a desktop will do, but make sure that you document when did you talk to a vendor about making things better? When did you do that touch with them? In marketing, it takes 7 touches for you to get into the idea of buying a product. That's what they say. That's why those ads are coming up in your feeds constantly. And the same can be said for vendor advocacy, right? You need multiple touches in order for them to understand you're not going away. This is important. Ultimately, it would be great if we could all say, you know what? We're not going to buy your product. And that's great, but we all don't have the ability to do that. So you can intimate it, but I don't know if you can actually follow through, and that's a dangerous game. Collect user feedback and user stories. So this is really important. One of the things that we work on is explaining to the vendors who we have. We don't say their names and what their specific disabilities are, but we will address the situation. I will say I have a student who's got macular degeneration and is losing her sight, and she needs to get as much of this visual information in, and that's her goal. She wants to meet that goal before she loses her sight completely. Who would scoff at that? Who would scoff at that, right? So it gives them a motivation to pull things up the chain and advocate on their end to get things done. Then consider the reasonable exceptions as discussed. Exceptions are not the rule. You want to make sure you always have a timeline for yourself, for a vendor, for yourself. You want to make sure that you're making progress and understand that accessibility is iterative and that we all learn from failure. Lizzo included. So I don't know how many of you were paying attention, but Lizzo is a young artist who is amazing and came out with a song this summer, and it took her 3 days to listen to feedback. She used the word spaz, which was really an ableist term that upset people who were spastic, who had spastic conditions. And within 3 days, she turned around and said, you know what? I failed you, and that's okay because I'm learning and we're all learning. And so that's important. So, I'm happy to see people are putting their information in the chat. So she said, as an influential artist, I'm dedicated to being part of the change I've been waiting to see in the world. I want you to not forget about event accessibility. I know I'm running a little short, but I want to get to goal setting here. So, there is in the resources, we have the Cornell checklist for events. We have our own personal checklist, but I didn't want everything to be like purchase related, or SUNY related. So there are lots of great examples out there, but things you want to pay attention to for your events. Obviously, you've already been, sort of tutored on physical accessibility and egress, but acoustics. Even if you have good acoustics, I could speak to you right now throughout this webinar without using the headset. The headset looks weird. My hair doesn't look great. I can't worry about that because the more important thing is you've got a clear connection with me using the mic, and that's important. So make sure that it becomes part of your process to engage these things as you're doing events, especially if you're doing hybrid events. Captioning in ASL, service animals, allergies, and make sure that for any handouts you have digital versions as well. So let's talk about what you're already doing. I am going to share one of the things that I've done at Purchase, which is my updates page. So we have a library, initiatives, and updates, and you are going to see how the sausage is made here. So this is a chronological list that I just put in the chat of changes that we've made at the Purchase College Library over time. And this effort really began from 2002 to 2017. That was sort of, I call it laying the foundation, but that's how I sort of slowly got sucked into accessibility, to be honest, because we had a grant and somebody brought some equipment over to the library and I was charged with finding the room, supposedly in the back of the basement. And I was like, what's the equipment? Who's it for? I was like, for blind users, you can't put that in the back of the basement. So that I became the go-to person. I'm not going to share my screen for that because there are going to be resolution issues and it's going to be too small for you to see, but the link is in the chat. And I would also, again, refer you to creating inclusive libraries by applying universal design. To Carly Spina's work. So I want to share with you Carly's newest work that I've been working with her on, and it is the questionnaire. And I'm going to put that in the chat as well. And this is something for you to think about as you're making your updates. There's probably a lot of stuff you're already doing and a lot of stuff you already have. And part of the problem is getting your head around it. So you can pop in here and take a look. You all have comment ability. You don't have editability in here, but we are interested in making this a better tool. It is going to be published. And I think it's a pretty comprehensive list. She's looked at it. I've looked at it. Colleen Lucas also been working on that from SUNY. And they've been instrumental in really laying out a kind of checklist for what are the kinds of things you should and could be thinking about. Okay, so I'm bringing this back to time. There are some free training opportunities and some suggestions, and I'm including these in the resource list as well. But the Kansas Accessibility Resources Network, one of the things I like about this is that if you want to do training in-house, they allow for a certificate without you having to pay extra. So you'll notice the next one down is the one from W3C, which is the organization that created the WCAG guidelines. They have a course that's Digital Accessibility Foundations, but if you want the certificate, it's an extra $99. I'm just really cognizant of the fact that we all don't have this. So one of the things I'm doing with the Kansas Accessibility Resource Network document is, or tutorial is that I have some high school interns and I don't want to have them pay for a certificate, but this is one way I can make sure that they get something done without having to be a SUNY person in part of my network where they would have DQ, they would get a certificate that way, or without having to pay extra. So there are a couple of good free options out there. A lot of library systems have access to LinkedIn Learning. I'd like you to think about that because it's something that you might be able to negotiate at a good rate. I know the Westchester Library System here does in downstate. And that is really useful and also has some courses. And as mentioned, Purchase College and SUNY has access to DQ University, which is free for us right now. But if you were to pay for it, it would be about $320 a year. And it includes a ton of courses and it's wonderful information, but not everybody can afford that. So if you have a disability, you can request access to DQ University. I've also mentioned some of the influencers and accessibility advocates that I follow, like Meryl Evans and Carly Spina and others, Alexa Heinrich, and there are also some great meetups. So Meryl Evans helps to run with Thomas Logan the New York Accessibility or A11Y meetup. And if you see that term A11Y, it's because it stands for accessibility and there are 11 letters between the A and the Y in accessibility. So if you've ever seen that, that's a shortcut for a lot of this and you may see that on a lot of these pages. And also A12Y, which is accountability. And then those Facebook groups that I mentioned. So we have 5 minutes left for goal setting. I'm sorry we don't have more time. There are 3 ways for you to do this. Grab an envelope and start writing a note to yourself. Create an email and delay the delivery of it to yourself. Or go into futureme.org and I'll put the link in your chat. Because this is about action, right? This is about holding ourselves accountable. A12Y. So futureme.org. I'm using this. This is an app. I had to do this session for you. I wanted it to be an interactive thing where you come away with something. I love this idea. I used to do it in workshops where I had prepaid postage, postcards, and I would send them to people after the workshop, but that's not really accessible. And this is where we're at. So I tested this myself with a screen reader and I noticed that the default is to private, but you could write a public letter to yourself. That particular field is not accessible. You can't change it. So if that had been set as default to public, I would not have used it. On top of that, knowing that the screen reader, and I had to sort of check this because I'm learning to use a screen reader myself, knowing that the screen reader skipped it, I wanted to make sure that it was fully accessible for this workshop. So I had a friend of mine who is blind test it. If you need blind testers or you need disabled testers, you should be paying them for their work. However, this person was kind enough to do it for me. So it is accessible at a base level, and it's a wonderful way to set some goals for yourself. So I'm not going to tell you what your goals are. You're going to tell you what your goals are, but you've had some reflections to work with other people and to learn from other people in the chat. And I'm hoping that you can do that for yourself. And I think that that literally gets us to, good Lord, did I do it? We have a couple of, I'm sorry I didn't have more time for questions, but unmute and share. Was this helpful? Was it totally overwhelming or did I help you see it as doable? Yes, do watch the previous series on YouTube. They are excellent. And the one on the one from Krista on physical accessibility is fascinating. And one of the examples that she brings up is the Hunter Point Library, which was this huge, expensive project. And Carly actually talks about that in the beginning of this book. And accessibility was not thought about at all. Usability wasn't thought about at all. They had grates on the staircase and women didn't want to go up in skirts. So, these things need to be a forethought, not an afterthought. And I really just hope that what we've been able to do here is take the time to be more conscious about making it feel doable. So we're going to save this chat, right, Mary Carol? So we have all of the names of people who want to coordinate. Love the idea of an accountability hour. That's been really helpful for me as a professional to just band together with somebody. So if you're in a library system and there are several branches, maybe just say, you know what, Mary Carol and I both want to learn about screen readers. So we're going to stay on mute on Zoom, and we're just going to practice for a half an hour over lunch and see how it goes. And then I'm going to unmute and be, oh my gosh, Mary Carol, I cannot figure out how to turn off JAWS. That's what happens. Or like one of the things that I do at the college, I've set my accessibility features on my iPhone. I'm holding up my iPhone to allow for the screen reader. So if I have it set for 3 clicks, oops, sometimes I take a picture. So I don't know if you can hear that. I'm in my mail.
All inboxes. Heading. Search field. Dictate. Button. Messages. Unread.
So
Purchase college notification. Suggested news story.
see, nobody wants to hear that. Purchase.edu. There we go. Turn it on and turn it off is the most important thing. So, so it was really great. I'm so glad that you all were able to join in, and I hope that the consciousness continues.
Rebecca, thank you so much. Were there any last questions?
Oh, let me check the anonymous form in case anybody popped into anything in there.
Sure. And I keep hearing in my mind that we do have special interest groups at South Central, and maybe Christine and I should be talking about one for accessibility.
So I just popped in the anonymous form in case you have any complaints, which is possible, or things I should work on, which I recognize, or things that you just want to tell me privately, and we can ensure that feedback for the workshop includes that.
Okay. That sounds good. And I did put a link to the survey. It's not
wonderful.
a perfect survey, but it's the one that we need to be using, and for IMLS and ARPA. And
Where is the link for that? I don't see it.
I can repost it. Let's see.
Oh, I see. It's a SurveyMonkey.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, terrific.
Well, thank you so much, Rebecca, for your workshop, and thanks to everybody for attending. And
I'll stay on for a couple of minutes as people filter out. If you have any questions or want to talk, please stay on and feel free. You have me, and I'm happy to brainstorm with you.